Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MPE Summer Week. Please join us in welcoming the chairman of the programme for Day 3, Melisandre Mual.
Hi, and a warm welcome to the first session of the third day of the MPE Summer event that the Imperia Group has put together. Amazing job, guys, and it's great to see so many of you joined this week's sessions. My name is Melisandre Mual. I'm the publisher of The Papers, the global leading source of news and analysis for professionals in payments, fintech, and commerce. And I'm delighted to moderate today's session. The pandemic has definitely accelerated digitization. And today we would like to discuss how this changed card acquiring and payments acceptance. We have some great experts today that will share insights into the change in shopping habits and what this means for payment preferences across channels. And most importantly, how merchants can respond to these changes. But first, some housekeeping rules. You have the opportunity to submit your questions through the polls tab on the right of your screen. So please use this window. You can also use the chat, but the polls works a bit better. And I will be able to address these questions during the panel discussion. The sessions are being recorded and they will be distributed later. So now that we have the housekeeping out of the way, I'm delighted to welcome the first speaker, James Booth, Head of Partnerships EMEA at PPRO. So James, could you please introduce yourself briefly?
Perfect. Thank you for having me, Melisandre. As mentioned, I'm the Vice President and Head of Partnerships for the Europe, Middle East and Africa region at PPRO. So in my role, I essentially manage all of our partnerships in the region, be it partnerships with banks, financial institutions, gateways, PSPs, acquirers, etc. I manage both the new business side of the business, as well as all of our strategic account management partnerships. So thank you for having me.
Great.
Perfect. So, as mentioned, in my role, I manage all of our partnerships for the Europe, Middle East region. And over the past few months, we've noticed some trends throughout the payments landscape. We've noticed a real digital shift occurring. It's been occurring for years. However, we've definitely seen this trend accelerate. So today, I'm going to look at some of these trends and try piece that together from some statistics we've seen through our engine. So off we go. So firstly, to start off with, I think the overall news and the overall message that we've seen, at least throughout the pandemic, is generally positive news for e-commerce amid a pandemic. Obviously, there's always silver linings. However, in general, global GDP is expected to decrease. There are certain sectors that are obviously going to suffer a bit through the pandemic. However, we've seen seismic shifts towards e-commerce. And today, I'm going to run you through some of the monumental changes we've seen in consumer behavior that's driving a lot of this shift, which industries are still enjoying growth throughout the pandemic and potentially post-pandemic. How ticket sizes have increased throughout the changes in shopping habits, and where global consumers are shopping today. So as I mentioned, it's clear there's been a big seismic shift due to coronavirus and the various localized lockdowns that's occurred on a regional basis. And essentially, this trigger has really shone a spotlight on the fact that traditional payment methods or rails like cash and credit cards, and when I mean credit cards in their traditional form, will continue to decline as users go online. This is a trend that's been occurring on a global basis for years. We've seen a lot of transactions move from the point of sale to brick and mortar merchants to online. But really what we've seen in the past 6 months is an acceleration of the shift. On a global basis, we've seen adoption rates for alternative and local payment methods grow as much in the past 8 months that was originally projected to span over a multitude of years. So this acceleration in shift is part of the story that I'll be telling today. And essentially, we're no longer talking about incremental adoption of local payment methods or digital payment methods, but a massive shift to a digital-first economy and a digital-first approach to payments. So as I mentioned, e-commerce is still growing. It's been the trend for years, and it's most likely definitely will continue. It's been slowly capturing the overall payments market. However, there are some trends that have occurred throughout the pandemic that have shifted this trend and shifted the projection or the roadmap for the future. And a lot of these are here to stay. Firstly, in the US, we saw a 54% increase in orders in the first week of April. Obviously, as soon as the lockdown occurred in regions, we immediately saw an influx in online payments. We saw basic needs. A lot of consumers had to rush out to go buy office equipment, maybe new clothes, maybe pharmaceuticals. We saw a rush into online grocery shopping. In Germany and France, we did some research and some research before this, and 80% of consumers are now making at least half of their purchases online. So again, a continuing trend to making purchases online. And lastly on the slide, in China, sales of common household goods quadrupled during the peak of the outbreak, which is just massive. Now, the big story here is as I mentioned, these are trends that we've always seen, trends that were going to happen over time. However, the biggest story here, or the biggest learning here that we've seen, is millions of people who previously resisted e-commerce, particularly for fast-moving consumer goods such as groceries or pharmaceuticals, signed up for e-commerce sites during the pandemic. We saw lots of retailers actually have to close their shops or close their e-commerce operations for a few weeks in order to accommodate the influx. Here in the UK, where I'm based, we saw Ocado, the largest online e-commerce grocery shop. They actually had to close their entire operations for almost a week to account for the growth that they saw in their platform. So really, online shopping that had already been the norm for Gen Z or millennials or early adopters grew, but COVID-19 really has served as the inflection point for other demographics or consumers that might never have entered the digital e-commerce space. And we've seen a huge trend towards that. So now I'm going to look into some of the transactions that we've seen over the lockdown, and I just want to caveat this first, because this is a lot of the transactional details that I'll go through here is based on PPRO's cross-border transaction engine, and I'm concentrating on a data set from January to June of this year. So really, this period reflects the most severe lockdown periods around the world. And I'll target into certain verticals and show how that affected overall transaction growth volumes. So really, the pandemic has to a degree helped refine what categories of goods consumers feel are essential, because really the first one here, women's clothing in stores, we saw a 311% growth over that 6-month period for women's clothing in stores. Perhaps more casual at home attire. We saw lots of just casual retail clothing spike, less formal wear being bought, and maybe that dovetails into the jewelry sector. We saw jewelries and accessories up 83%. I'm on the Zoom call now. It's a small rectangle screen. I can only control that portion of the screen, and I can only control my presence for a small area. So maybe I'm going out there and I'm buying more casual clothing, but I'm buying some jewelry, or for the ladies out there, they're buying jewelry so we can look nice for all the video calls we're taking. So furniture and home furnishings skyrocket as well, 143%, as noted on the left. And that's clearly indicative as we spend more time at home. There was a massive spike, as I showed you there in the beginning, from China and the US. And clearly that was driven from consumers wanting to kit out their home offices. Everybody needed a monitor at home, a work desk, maybe a new couch because their old couch was getting old. And that was a severe spike we saw at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's continued over time as consumers have invested more time in their furniture and home furnishings. because we're spending more time at home, and we're going to continue spending more time at home. Not to go through everyone here, but the next vertical that I want to highlight here is gaming. So 105% increase in the gaming vertical over January to June, and gaming, not gambling. One would expect that number would be significantly higher, but the growth rate pre-pandemic was still quite high for this sector. So that's been a vertical. We've seen a constant trend. We've seen a lot of growth in gaming, a lot of growth in esports, and that was accelerated further in the first 6 months of the year due to the lockdown. Now, there's always some winners and some losers, and quite clearly, travel agencies and tour operators were a clear loser throughout the pandemic and in social distancing times. We saw almost 90% decrease in travel agency and tour operating company businesses, as well as a significant decrease in airline travel, which I haven't noted here because it's quite obvious in the region. However, this is slowly starting to pick back up, but it's very clear that pre-COVID levels are not going to come anytime soon. The airline industry is only predicting that pre-COVID airline or travel capacity is expected in late 2021 on an optimistic level, most likely 2022 or 2023. Membership clubs, we saw about a 43% decline. Sports, recreation, athletic clubs, golf clubs obviously closed, gyms closed, private golf courses closed. Many of us probably exercise more, but we're doing it on a more localized basis. We're going for runs in the local parks, or maybe buying a bicycle and riding through things. We're not going to membership clubs. We're not going to areas where there's too much social interaction or too much capacity there. Funny enough, we saw a decrease in shoe stores. Maybe that's also kind of a counterbalance to the increase in women's wear or men's wear. I'm not wearing shoes now when I work at home. There's no need to. So that's a clear loser that we've seen. And lastly, just to highlight here, another significant loser that we saw was photography studios. And it doesn't seem that great here because we've actually seen a steady decline in purchasing photography equipment over time because of the rise of smartphones. However, we saw a clear drop-off as soon as the lockdown occurred. We're not going out there, we're not pursuing those types of hobbies, and we're maybe picking up our phone and using our phone more to take photographs. And that'll dovetail into the story that I try and highlight later on. Now, along with the sectors that have increased and decreased, within those, there's been a clear differentiator, and there's been a clear increase in average ticket sizes for certain verticals. Leisure, sports, and hobby, and this is on a retail basis, not leisure, sports, and hobby centers. But the retailers within this vertical, we saw almost over 90% increase in their average ticket sizes, up from 46.6 euros to almost 88.8 euros on a basis. So not only are consumers buying more personal sports equipment and moving away from the sports clubs, but their average ticket size is significantly increased. On the retail front, a 30% increase from 30.7 up to 45.1. Non-profits, we saw non-profits increase from 24.5. So as consumers had more disposable income, for those that are still employed, maybe they weren't spending more money on traveling or on vacations or on public transport. They had more disposable income to contribute towards a lot of the good charities out there and non-profit organizations that have been helping those in need over the past 6 months. Gaming, we saw an increase from 51.8 to 61.9 euros. And lastly, jewelry and accessories, again, continuing the trend of buying more casual clothes at home and maybe complementing that with more jewelries or accessories, or having a little bit more disposable income for those who participate in e-commerce. Next up, as part of the research that we did and as part of the analysis on our cross-border engine, we had a look at some of the cross-border flows or some of the cross-border channels or corridors where we saw exponential growth. And we saw there was a clear correlation in consumers increasing their localized shop, as in localized to a specific region. However, merchants saw a significant increase in their volume as they enabled local payment methods in the region. And what I mean here is we saw, from a European perspective, we saw a lot of European consumers shopping locally within the Eurozone versus shopping in the US or in China or from those particular merchants because of maybe potential delays to shipping times or worries that the goods wouldn't arrive on time, and they tended to shop local. And that was compounded by the effect of many merchants activating specific localized payment methods and seeing a sharp increase. So for example, Belgium and Germany, very close within the same region, saw a 52% increase from bank contact transactions. Consumers based in the Netherlands shopping from merchants based in Ireland, we saw a 240% increase in transactions over the period of January to June. And Germany and France, neighbors, we saw consumers in Germany shopping at French merchants using Sofort and Klarna. And through those methods, we saw a 59% increase in their transaction volume. And last but certainly not least, we saw Polish consumers using P24, PayU, and that's Blick there, apologies for the logos. We saw an increase in 192% transaction growth from merchants activating those payment methods and seeing immediate spikes from pre to post pandemic habits. Now, just before I wrap up and give my closing statement, from the LPM side, we saw clear winners from an LPM side. So at PPro, we concentrate a lot of our time in helping specific merchants and PSPs target regions and activate payment methods. However, on the other side, we work very closely with our local payment method partners in helping them fine-tune their solution and enhance their offering for specific industries. So on an LPM basis, we saw certain winners throughout the pandemic. So Alipay, the top industries over a 6-month period was retail and authority and administration, that being government payments and university payments within that sector. WeChat Pay, very digital focused, so digital goods, retail and telecommunications. Blick, which is a Polish payment method, the top growth industry being the financial services industry, so a lot of e-wallet type payments and FX type services, and dating. MyBank, the top industry being Forex, Trustly, the top industry being financial services, and Ideal, the top industry being retail. So those being clear verticals that those payment methods saw a significant increase in volume and a significant increase in future potential within those regions. Now, before I end, I wanted to close with a statement because throughout the short presentation, I think the biggest message that I've wanted to make here is we've seen shifts happen. We've seen an immediate shift to certain verticals. We were forced to buy groceries online. We were forced to do more e-commerce shopping. A lot of consumers were forced to make their first e-commerce payments or use different methods of payment. However, the key here is the length of time that this has incurred, because as brick and mortar shops start to open, we're seeing lockdowns open up over the past few months. A lot of this e-commerce growth is going to stagnate. A lot of these verticals will move to pre-COVID levels, but the reality is we'll be in some form of social distancing for a long time to come. It's no longer fun, it's no longer enjoyable going to a grocery store where you have to wait in a line, you have to wear a mask, you have to sanitize your hands. It takes more time, it can be more stressful for a lot of consumers. So we're looking for new ways to purchase these goods. And now that the world is opening up, these new habits are starting to come into play. We're seeing in pubs, certainly here in London, it's become the norm to purchase or to order your beers from the pub using an app. You walk into a pub, you open an app on your phone, and you order a pint of lager. Some pubs in the UK have had this for years. They've had this functionality for years, but it was really reserved for early adopters, and now it's become mainstream. You walk into many restaurants today, there'll be a QR code on the table, and that would pop up the menu, and you could pay through a lot of these mechanisms. Pre-COVID, using QR codes on a widespread basis was mainly reserved for local payment methods in Southeast Asia and China. However, it really is becoming the norm here in Europe. It can take anywhere from 18 to 256 days for a habit to form. So if we're using these new forms of payment, if we're transacting in a different way for an extended period of time, they're going to become habit, and we're going to want to use these indefinitely. So the average amount of time it takes for a new habit to form is about 66 days. And I know for me, I'm on day 170 of some form of social distancing. So for me, I see this lockdown as a fundamental shift in how we transact online and how we interact with digital payments, because they really are becoming mainstream, and they're only going to grow exponentially as soon as it hits the mainstream. So lastly, that's a very, very brief overview of some of the data. I ran through it very quickly. However, a lot of this is available in a white paper that we've put together. Happy to discuss it later. I'm sure we'll get some questions throughout the panel session later on. But thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, James. Fascinating to learn more about the preferences for jewelry and accessories. I didn't expect that, I have to admit. Let's talk a little more about this massive shift to digital payments later in the panel discussions, but because there's definitely some topics that we would like to address, whether it's e-wallets, online banking, e-payments, buy now, pay later. What do people new to e-commerce prefer to pay with? But thanks for now. And I would like to welcome our second speaker, Holly Worst. She's Director of Strategy and Marketing, Retail and B2B Payments at WorldPay from FIS. So Holly, great to see you. Welcome. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Holly Worst. I'm the Director of Retail and B2B Payments over here at WorldPay, a global acquirer. So very nice to meet you all. Yeah, so jumping in, today I wanted to talk about the global omnichannel shopper. So a little bit different from James talking about the move to digital. I'm talking about how does the digital and the physical world really still fit together. And that's because if anyone knows WorldPay, we predominantly were an e-commerce only acquirer. And now we're really making that push into the in-store world. And so we were under our own discovery to try to discover what is the omnichannel customer experience and how does payments fit into that world and how can we make it better. Yeah, so first, before we talk about anything, we all need to get on the same page about what is the omnichannel customer experience. To us, it's the customer experience that's made up of individual customer touch points over a variety of channels that seamlessly fit together. And I think that's the part that most retailers are probably missing, is that seamless connection. We often, you say you have your physical store, you say you have your online store, you have the mobile app, but do the three of them talk together? Do you have the same type of brand experience on it? Can a customer shop on one and seamlessly pick up when they go online to continue their checkout process? So it's those types of questions and conversations that we want to start having with retailers to truly understand what is this experience and how can we, fix some of the issues along the way. And the reason why we're all focused on the omnichannel experience is because omnichannel is what our retailers care about. We asked everyone, what are your top payment preferences or your payment related initiatives? Over the next 18 months, and 40% said that would be implementing omnichannel scenarios. And we're definitely hearing this from our retailers when we talk to them when it comes to RFPs. Everybody's asking us the questions of how can I get my store and my physical store and my online store and my social media website and my mobile app all to speak to each other. And the reason why our retailers care is because, quite frankly, the omnichannel customer is just worth way more money. So 73% of consumers use more than one channel already during their shopping journey. So 73% are already omnichannel. And these shoppers spend 4% more in store, 10% more online, and are worth 2.6 times the margin of just a single channel customer. So it's really important that, we're asking these questions and we're working towards how to understand this customer in every part of that journey. And that's exactly where we get to this, is to understand that customer experience. You really need to take note of the omnichannel shopping journey. So there's multiple touch points a customer will go through, from browsing to purchasing to delivery and returns to customer care, or to even leaving feedback or even searching for reviews in the very beginning. And at each of these touch points, your customer may use multiple channels with you, or just one channel, or they may not even use that part of the journey during that particular purchase. So at WorldPay, we were really intrigued to understand, how does the omnichannel shopper prefer to shop? What channels do they prefer at each one of these touch points? What are some of the pain points along this journey, especially from a payment perspective? And then how can retailers and payment providers like ourselves solve some of these issues to help everybody sell more and sell better? So what we did is we actually conducted a study with over 1,200 customers around the globe about their habits and preferences along this omnichannel journey. So this is a little bit of a sneak peek. It's not ready yet. It'll be ready in about 2 months. But when I was going through the data, there were 3 key themes that really jumped out at me that I thought we could talk about today. So the first is that both physical and digital presence are still very important. Secondly, convenience is key, but so are payments. And lastly, we have returns are the new normal, so let's get them right. So when we jump into this, both physical and digital presence are important. So this is a graph where we asked, this shows the percentage of respondents who used each channel for the following activities along the Omni shopping journey. So for browsing, did they use physical, website, a mobile app? Did they use social media, a voice assistant, a phone call, or did they not use it at all? And as you can see, the green is actually a website. So as James said before, and I think as all of us see from our personal use, having a web page is extremely important, and it's the #1 channel used along every single aspect of the omnichannel customer experience. However, when you look at this baby blue area, that's the physical store. So when it comes to browsing and purchasing, having a physical presence is still very much important. And I think this is where I kind of get in this, debate with stores. You see a lot of stores shutting down. And really when retailers, they often look at profitability by channel. So how's my store doing? How's my online website doing? But there needs to be a fundamental shift to kind of look at what's the customer lifetime value, because how do you attribute some sales when someone came into the store to touch and feel the product and to browse, but then went online to make the final purchase? So if you would take away that store, would that customer have even made the purchase in the first point? So I think there is a happy balance out there between getting it right between that physical and online experience. The last thing I want to call out on here, though, is actually social media. So that is this blue right here. So social media is actually becoming extremely important in the browsing, in the giving and receiving feedback aspect, and in actually purchasing. It's about 13%. So I find this quite amazing. We are, especially younger consumers, and even myself sometimes, I find myself on social media quite a lot. And it's only that this year did we get Facebook shops and Instagram shops where you don't have to actually leave the app to make a purchase. So this already represents quite a large portion of online shopping, even though it's a terrible user experience. So I can imagine over the next year and the year after that, I would expect social media to overtake some of the other channels, because it's going to become a lot easier and a much more pleasant experience for consumers. The second key theme that came out was convenience is key, but so are payments. So we actually asked all of our respondents what were the top 3 factors that drove your preference of shopping in this particular channel over other channels. So take the physical store, convenience was number 1, customer care number 2. So they prefer the physical store by convenience over others. But when you look across the data, convenience is actually the number 1 or number 2 reason why consumers prefer a particular channel. But to me, when I hear that, I kind of think, no, duh. We're all very time strapped. We're impatient people. Convenience is almost the minimum that every retailer should be shooting for in order to make the experience a pleasant shopping experience. So what I was really intrigued at was actually looking at the other reasons why consumers were using that channel. So for example, when you looked at the physical store, the number 2 reason to shop in store was for customer care. So that's a challenge for retailers of how can you ensure that your customer care is at its optimal best whenever someone walks into your store. And when you look across the board, the most popular reason for consumers, number 2, was actually payment reasons. And this was everything from offering my preferred payment method to allowing me to store my card credentials to offering the most secure way to pay. And so obviously that's when someone like myself and a company like WorldPay, a payment related company, we get really excited because it shows that payments plays such a huge part of the omnichannel shopping journey, but also just the shopping journey in general. So there's a lot of research out there about abandoned baskets and what causes it. And 7 out of the top 10 reasons is always because, oh, my credit card didn't work or they didn't have my payment method. So payments tends to be the last thing that retailers think about, but it's at the very end of the purchase funnel. So it should be something that you have top of mind because you have companies like us who can help you figure it out and get it right and make it work smoothly for everyone. The last key theme and something really big that's happening, I'm sure all retailers are seeing it in their margins, is that returns are the new normal. So let's get them right. As we move to more online shopping, returns are going to increase. We already see really, really high return rates in fast fashion, up to 60, 70% for some brands. I would say 20% is probably pretty average, and you definitely see less in high ticket items when people know exactly what they want. But again, as returns are going to increase, as we move to more digital experiences, this is the new normal. So you really have to work hard. How do you get it right? How do you win your customers over? And how do you find those issues and fix it for them? So we actually asked our respondents for their top payment related challenges faced when making a return. So the number 1 challenge they faced, 48%, was a slow refund time. And the second one is 45% said they were charged for returns. So being charged for postage. And this one actually, that hits home because obviously by offering free shipping, and many, many people out there are buying 5 things with the full intention to return 4 of them, that shipping is hitting your bottom line and hitting your margin directly. So I think retailers are going to be faced with finding some unique ways in order to get that margin back. So one of the questions we actually asked in the survey was, what would incentivize a consumer to give up personal data? Because we all know there's going to be some issues coming up with GDPR and getting customer data. And 48% of respondents said free shipping. So I think there's going to be easy ways to offer this incentive and solve this payment challenge for returns by offering customers deals and incentives in other ways. And the reason why we care about getting returns right is because 37% of respondents did not shop at a retailer again if they faced payment challenges during a return. So basically, every retailer has 1 shot to get it right, or you can expect a consumer never to come back again. So over here at WorldPay, as we said, we've been putting a huge focus on omnichannel, and we're really diving deep into expanding our omnichannel capabilities across the globe and working to enhance that customer experience. So we want to turn ordinary, mundane consumer transactions into smarter, connected experiences. And we want to do this in a few ways to help retailers. So one, it's achieving that single view of a shopper. So we want you to be able to understand your shopper, who they are, what their habits. We want you to know everything about them, no matter what channel they shop in. And the great thing about payments is usually the one thing in common and the one piece of data that you can track between every single channel is your credit card or debit card information. So we're able to provide some of that data. Secondly, we want to help you provide a single view of the inventory. So retailers out there need to have one source of truth for your in-store and online inventory. So we call this the endless aisle. And what's great about payments is we can help you have that instant payment and transaction information so that your inventory levels can be as accurate as possible all the time. And then lastly, we want to help you have a single view of the payments. So we want to make sure that you as a retailer can offer the same payment experience online that you do in store and vice versa, or the same experience that you do on your social media site or your Alexa voice device or in car payments everywhere. So by working with someone like us and having those payment options, we can give you that full and equal view no matter where your customer is shopping. But yeah, that's everything. Thank you all so much. We have questions afterwards, but you can feel free to email me as well at holly.worst@fisglobal.com.
Okay, Holly, thank you so much. And what a great research. I know you're still working on it, but please ping me when it's online, and hope we can talk a little bit about more about it during the panel. So I would like to welcome the third speaker who will join our panel, Frederik Hesse. He is Director of Business Development, European Acceptance and Acquiring Intelligence at MasterCard. So Frederik, could you please tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Sure, thanks, Melisande, and thanks for having me. My name is Frederik Hesse, and I'm part of the European Acceptance and Acquiring team at MasterCard. With that broader team, we work a lot with acquirers and payment facilitators and other aggregators across Europe. I personally look after the acceptance and acquiring intelligence area, so a lot on insights development, and yeah, thrilled to be here and look forward to the discussion. Thanks for the two great presentations. That was very interesting, and yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Frederik. And I would like to start with, of course, a question from the audience that is basically for James, but if one of you would like to comment, please raise your hands as well in the panel. In your presentation, you talked a lot about online banking e-payments solutions, like I think there's Blake, there's Bank Contact, there's Ideal. How do you see open banking play a part in the relevance and the further development of these online banking e-payments?
Yeah, so I see open banking playing quite a bit of relevance. I mean, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the shift to digital payments, as I mentioned in the presentation. So, open banking would just be another enabler and another rail that allows more efficient payment flows. So today it's still very much in its infancy. There's been a few use cases and a few successes, but like many of these new shifts, it's going to take time to be adopted. But it also depends on where it takes off. You know, I don't see open banking competing with some of the incumbent, let's say, bank transfer methods within the region. You're not going to see open banking competing directly with Ideal in the Netherlands. They have such a large market share. I see it very relevant in markets where there maybe are no existing incumbent bank transfer or alternative rails, and there's space in the market.
And maybe Holly, because I know that WorldPay is also, you know, you're currently experimenting or developing some products around open banking. And can you give some examples of the learnings in this particular field?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super close to it, but my one thing is that the only way open banking can overtake some of these other experiences is making sure that the user experience when you're using it is as easy as possible. So from the apps that I've seen and the prototypes and everything, it's super easy. It's like 2 clicks, where I actually think adoption might be quite high as long as it offers that really quick and easy application compared to other types of payment methods out there. So I'm intrigued. I mean, obviously it's hitting the UK first, so it'll be really exciting to see what happens. But usually whatever happens in the UK first spreads out to the rest of the world. So we're going to see a lot of this in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I agree a lot with that, especially when it comes to open banking. I see it as being one of the enablers. It's the most important thing, and I agree with you, Holly, is the app, it's the user experience. Because as soon as you get user adoption, as soon as you get consumers using these apps to make payments, open banking is just the channel that you plug in the back end to help enable the transfer of funds.
Yeah. And maybe to add to that, maybe for a second. I mean, first of all, I agree completely. Convenience. Holly mentioned it in her presentation, and yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think in addition to that, it's also going to be the balance between security and convenience, right? We must not forget about that security piece, especially in the online environment, where we have historically higher fraud rates than in the face-to-face environment. So it's going to be about striking the balance there. On the one hand side, delivering that convenience and as seamlessly as possible letting the customer check out, and while at the same time also keeping the security high. And that's also going to be the challenge then with SCA kicking in towards the end of the year.
Yeah, no, totally valid point, Frederick. But to the point of view, Holly, that you basically discussed during your presentation, I mean, merchants spend so much money. There's increasingly competition online. So how much money do you spend to get, shoppers to your shop, download your app, be visible on social media, basically get all the components right, then get them into the checkout page. And then it's up to you, basically, all us in the merchant payment ecosystem to do a very, very good job. Because as we know, almost 70% of shoppers abandon the shopping cart. So what I found intriguing in your research, Holly, is that you mentioned that consumers have a preference. Basically, they start maybe browsing online, but they have a preference for the payment in the mobile app. Do you have some data about how does a mobile app perform better in terms of people actually finalizing the transaction compared to, for instance, the website interface? And yeah. Second, how do merchants that are successful get people to download these apps? Because we spend 80 to 90% of our time on mobile. We do that on apps. So I guess it's crucial to get people in your retail app. So yeah, maybe two questions, but can you elaborate a bit on both? So how does the mobile apps payments experience work better? And what can merchants do to get people downloading their apps?
Yeah, so the first one is, I know you've probably shopped on a mobile app versus the website, especially on your phone. So I think that's the main thing, is that just the fact that the mobile experience is much better on an app than it is on a mobile website. So a lot of people, as we move to using a cell phone and mobile commerce more than actually desktop computer commerce, you're going to start to see the mobile app become very important. But then again, you run into this issue of, I have 1 million apps on my phone. I had to delete a few to have some more pictures space. So you're going to get to a point where there are too many apps on your phone. But if a customer truly loves your brand and they're constantly searching for your products, they're going to keep your brand app on their phone and constantly go to it. Another thing that's great about the mobile experience, especially the app, is you usually have that one-click shopping. And again, that goes back to that convenience factor, is customers love that. Can you store your credit card information? Can it be safe and secure because it's in the app? I trust this brand. And then, oh wait, I can one-click Google Pay or Apple Pay. Boom, I'm checked out. I don't have to type in any more information. So that is something that usually the mobile app offers more than the website. There's no reason why it can't be the same, but it's just one of those aspects that, again, convenience is key, and offering that to customers is really important. When it comes to incentivizing people to download your app, I'm getting it a lot in every grocery store here in the UK. M&S is like, download your app, use the app, and you might win free groceries. So I think there is a little bit of a competition out there where you have to offer a little bit of something in order to get them to constantly engage with your app as well. So a lot of times I think there's the first purchase, 10% off. Great, I downloaded it. but what's going to get me to keep coming back? And I think it's knowing me, it's collecting my information, sending me a personal notification saying, hey, that shirt you really like is on sale. Why don't you purchase it? And finding ways to actively engage with your customer and know them on a personal level is really going to help.
Yeah, great. No, that makes perfect sense.
And that's just maybe a thought on that, if I may, Melissa.
Sure.
I think again that's very interesting, Holly. And I actually recall a study that we did in Asia Pacific on that exact topic, right? First, it's about engaging the customers and get them aboard for the first time, and try to keep them on that platform and basically incentivize them not to delete the app again. And what we found in that study is that exactly what you mentioned, right? So first it's about the maybe offering a discount, maybe incentivizing that some other way, but ultimately it comes back to the piece of the convenience that you mentioned, because that's really what keeps them there, even after the time where the discount period has ended, right? So back to the point that Holly has already made, but yeah, just worth mentioning, I think.
No, thanks for your addition. We've got a question to James, and I'm really happy, audience, that you sent in all these questions. That's really great for our speakers as well. James, question about the payment preferences of basically people new to e-commerce. You mentioned that boomers, generation. The older generations are basically within the lockdown also forced to do their shopping online. And can you elaborate a little bit more on their shopping or basically payment preferences?
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have a lot of statistics or details on that from the research that we've done. However, but just from experience over the past few years, I think the biggest topic there, and it was brought up by Frederick and by Holly, is convenience. So for new entrants to the e-commerce environment, it's all about a frictionless payment experience. We're certainly seeing an increased uptick, even when it comes to the omnichannel experience. We're seeing a significant increase in Apple Pay type transactions. When it comes to the e-commerce rails, if it's transacting through a bank transfer rail and they have passwords already stored on their personal laptop, much easier for these consumers to make their first transaction. So it's about a good balance between the frictionless payment experience and security. But certainly for the new entrants, it's all about removing any friction or any barriers.
Yeah, and have you seen an increase or less or a decrease in the demand for credit to pay for purchases? I mean, you mentioned during your presentation that for those that still have a job, maybe they can spend more on, for instance, non-profit, but there's also a lot of people who have some job issues. So did you see a decrease or increase in the demand for credit? And do you see, to the same point, solutions like buy now, pay later?
Yeah.
To this,
So certainly, yeah. I mean, as soon as you mentioned credit, that's immediately where I was going to go. We've seen a sharp increase in the buy now, pay later products. So your Klarnas, those invoice-based payment systems, and it also comes down to the ease of use of those payment methods, because they have such a rich feature set. Klarna, you buy multiple items, as Holly mentioned in her presentation. You're going to buy 4 or 5 T-shirts. You probably only intend to actually pay for 3 of them, and you don't want to give up. You don't want to put all of that on a debit or a credit card up front. So certainly those types of user experiences, we saw a significant increase throughout the first 6 months of the year.
And do you see this being picked up in the US as well?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. We see this trend pretty much on a global basis at the moment through all of the buy now, pay later type products, and you can clearly see that it's an interesting topic. I mean, Klarna were very early to it. There's Afterpay in Australia. They moved into the US, but even the large alternative payment methods are exploring these options. PayPal has PayPal credit, and there's various app-based payment methods in the EU that are also starting to launch credit type payment methods within a digital app or within a fully digital experience.
Yeah. to your point of the case where you basically buy two expensive coats and you sort of do not know exactly whether you should have an M or a large. It's the ideal. I think that would be the only scenario where I could consider, it's not about me, but where I think, this is a great experience because you do not have to pay upfront, a large ticket size.
And I think part of the success also there is it's the use case there of wanting to buy 4 goods and wanting to buy 2 goods and ordering 4 and trying in different sizes and different fits.
Yeah.
But actually, half of the success of a lot of these schemes is actually the frictionless nature of the payment checkout. You don't have to pull out your wallet and type in your credit card details. Most people don't have their cards stored on their laptop or on their mobile phone. They don't need to remember. You're pretty much checking out with your name, your address, your basic details that you know off the top of your head. So you can easily check out, and it's very quick and very seamless. And then you just pay for it at a later stage. So there's various use cases that I see within the pay later environment.
Great. And we have a question for Frederick and Holly. The question is that we are beginning to hear a lot more about switch to issuer as a model, where the merchant routes traffic directly to the scheme and onto the issuer. So how should acquirers feel about this new model? Maybe Frederick, could you comment first?
Yeah, sure. No, happy to. I think back a bit to the question of what we see in terms of the plethora of available methods out there, right? So I think in addition to all the other alternative providers, a couple of them have been mentioned by James already. This is a model that certainly has its advantages and that will be part of that collection, basically. So I think it depends a bit on the use case specifically, I would say. Overall, we have mentioned it a couple of times. Question is, whether that's also going to be possible with the same convenience, since it's not quite established yet. The users are not quite as used to that as well either. I think the message remains valid, right? It will be about that piece as well. And I can see that be a part of that mix overall. Of course, I don't have the crystal ball to say how much of the mix that's going to make up, but that's my view. Holly, anything to add from your side?
I would say whenever there's multiple parties in, a business model, you always try to cut one out. So you could even cut all the schemes out and go straight to the banks. But it comes down to, do merchants want to develop that business model? Do they want to become payment experts? Do they want to deal with all the hassle, the rules, the this, that? Probably not. So you're always going to have room for companies like ours to come in and help you optimize that side of the business.
Yeah, no, good points, Holly. Another question for you, Holly, on app payments. So the question is, what will win for app payments? Will it be native mobile payment flows or mobile web payments flows?
Oh, interesting. I do not know. That's one of those ones. I don't know. I think it all just depends on the user experience and what's going well, but definitely not in my crystal ball either to know that.
No. Can you give some, if you look into the checkout page, James, and how to optimize these for payment methods? Can you give some directions or some guidelines on, for instance, what would be the optimal number of payment methods to add to a checkout page?
Yeah, I mean,
we often see websites from PSPs bragging about that they have like 150, 200, up to 900, but what is sort of optimal to offer? Yeah,
definitely don't put 200 payment methods on your checkout. That'll be a little bit overwhelming. So we get asked this question from our clients quite often, or some of our new clients and some of the merchants that we consult with. And it really depends on the use case, because yes, there's hundreds of payment methods out there, arguably thousands. We've got the People Almanac, where we actually go out there and research every single payment method out there. And it's never a good idea to offer everything, because you need to look at each use case. So a retailer targeting a specific region of the world might have one mix of payment methods, so a retailer versus a gaming merchant might have a different mix. But it also depends on what region they're targeting from a consumer basis. It always makes the most sense to localize the checkout for each country, depending on the merchant vertical. So if you have the capabilities to do that, if you can look up consumers' IP addresses, or if there's some form of account sign-up flow where they're determining what country they're coming from, then it's very easy to determine a short list of payment methods that you would like to display to the consumer, and then you would go and classify by the specific vertical. So having a bank transfer with a pay later scheme with credit cards is very relevant for retail. You're not going to put a pay later scheme on a gambling website. You're never going to get accepted. You're never going to get boarded. But it really varies from merchant to merchant and what countries that they're targeting. So we spend a lot of our time trying to narrow that down, and we're seeing quite innovative solutions coming to the market from PSPs that we work with, whether it's looking up IP addresses, where it's automatically changing different buttons depending on the flow, depending on what device they're coming on. If they're checking out on a desktop versus a mobile, there may be some payment methods that are more mobile optimized. So you'd want that at the top of the checkout.
Yeah. So, Holly, to your point of obviously payments are crucial, and it's a huge dissatisfier and a reason for shopping cart abandonment. But to your point of refunds, that's also a crucial step in the customer journey, and to get that right. Can you share some of the best practices that you've seen among your customer base?
Yeah, one thing we're working on is actually in the in-store environment is tokenizing the purchase, so that when a customer goes to return something in store, they actually don't have to show their credit card or their debit card, whatever they paid with. We know the item based on the transaction number. So that's another experience of, hey, oh my God, I forgot my card. So now all of a sudden I can't return it in store. So you're easing that process. And then I think returns, there's something a little bit cheeky in the timing that you can always do, is that a customer really just wants to see in their bank statement that they have been credited the money, but it doesn't necessarily mean the money has had to move in the background. So there's aspects that I think retailers can practice with when it comes to debiting the issuing account, or even sending an email saying, hey, we got your package, your return will hit your bank account in 2 days. And just being very open with your communication to make sure that the customer feels comfortable about that.
Yeah. So if you get that right, that would be a great moment to do some net promotion score kind of,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, activation on your page. It's interesting. Talking about tokenization, I would be keen to learn a bit more from Frederick on what MasterCard or the schemes have been developing to increase convenience. So what is sort of in store to come next year or in the coming months to improve the journey and increase conversion?
Yeah. No, happy to. So yeah, the whole topic around the conversion. I mentioned it briefly a couple of minutes ago. Of course, one of the big things on the agenda for the next couple of months, respectively for the end of the year, is SCA coming in. But yeah, let's talk about that in a second. First of all, generally, it's been a topic, right? E-com, the convenience around that. We have seen stats on that, how many consumers actually think that today's checkout processes are convenient. And in Europe, we have some stats indicating that it's just every other customer happy with the processes. So lots of room for improvement, certainly. And we are doing a couple of things on that. So one example would be click to pay, respectively, the secure remote commerce button that has launched. So basically, instead of having to go on a website for the manual checkouts and every time enter in your card details and then the address and then going through the process very manually, of course, that is quite cumbersome and scares some customers away. So the idea is to have that simple ID that I can remember, that I use basically to go to the website. I just click on the click to pay button, use my ID, and then the field for the shipping address is automatically populated. I have my default payment method in the background, be it my preferred card or and basically have a more seamless checkout experience there. And that's the same for all the websites, right? So back to the point of that lack of consistency between merchant A, B, and C, where I have different processes, that brings a little more convenience to that, because it also allows the consumer to more easily grow that habit and get used to that simple process there.
And can I ask a question here, Frederick?
Yeah,
you mentioned it's launched, but is it available in Europe already?
We are getting. Sorry, I didn't catch the last part there.
And if not, when will it be available for basically European consumers?
So I know that we have launched it in the States and in Europe. My knowledge is that it is launched as well. I know that, of course, we're in the midst of signing up merchants for that as well, and basically getting everyone on board. Bear with me, since I don't have the exact dates right away. More than happy to follow up on that. Apologies for that. But another topic that I briefly wanted to mention in the course of the whole convenience and conversion piece is, and I mean, there's no way around it, we have to mention SCA, right? Strong customer authentication as mandated in PSD2. And that is basically going to be the next challenge then, because back to the point of striking the balance of convenience and security, that's really what we're trying to do. And of course, we're talking to a lot of our partners in the industry and merchants, and of course, there's a little bit of nervousness around it, and surely it will be all about the correct and efficient implementation of that, right? So just to go back to your question, Alessandro, what we are doing is we are, first of all, of course, we're helping our customers, our partners, to implement everything in time to make sure that we have everything in place for the consumers to go through the new processes then with a strong authentication. And that includes, of course, also things like leveraging the delegated authentication as is possible by the regulatory technical standards. But then also, of course, offering products in that space that allow for a seamless authentication, for instance, leveraging biometrics with some of the solutions that we have. So I think it can also be quite the opportunity, not just a challenge going forward, be it for SCA or also generally with that big shift towards e-commerce, right? And back to James' points from the presentation, right? A lot of the merchants right now that are moving to online are not the big merchants that have a separate department that can basically handle all this stuff then full time. A lot of them are small business owners, and therefore it's also about helping them not only to basically move online, but also to help educate them to promote the offerings they have online, basically holistically understand your merchant. And that goes back to Holly's point, and I found it super interesting to hear Holly talking about that holistic view, because I think refund is just one example of many where it's it really reflects that it's super important to have that end-to-end view towards the merchants as well.
No, totally. And with 2 more minutes to go, I would just like to wrap up asking you guys to give a last piece of wisdom, nuggets of or advice to merchants that are currently striving in this accelerated digitization and, well, as everyone says, unprecedented times. So, Holly, any piece of advice?
Mine's pretty simple. Social commerce. I think put money behind it, get it right. Let's do it.
Cool. Clear. James.
For me, it would be, social commerce is definitely a good one, but for me, it would be optionality, and just look at your consumer. What does your consumer want, and just give them the easiest possible flow and the easiest choice for them.
Cool. And Frederick.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it a bit broader actually, and say, yeah, keep an open mind and try out new channels and ways. Right? There's loads of actually super helpful resources out there that can help, be it with the transition to online, be it with promoting your offers, be it just signaling that you're back in business. And I think it can be viewed indeed as an opportunity and not just a challenge.
Great. It's 4 o'clock sharp. I would like to thank the audience for engaging with us and for attending this great session. James, Holly, and Frederick, many thanks for your insights. And all of you there, check out the research of PPRO. Keep an eye on Worldline's research to be published in 3 months, Holly. And I wish you all a very good rest of the day and great rest of this afternoon's other sessions. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.